Welcome to Out is Through, a podcast about living a meaningful life in difficult times. I'm Larry Lariosa, and I'm a life coach and licensed marriage and family therapist. In these uncertain times, maintaining a sense of well-being and purpose feels more challenging, yet more important than ever. In this podcast, I'll feature guests who have used their life experience, passion, and creativity to find personal meaning and deeper connection. As the saying goes, the only way out is through. And I hope these conversations help inspire you to live life to its fullest. So thanks for tuning in and enjoy the episode. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Out is Through, a podcast about living a meaningful life in difficult times. My name is Larry Lariosa, your host, and today's episode is part 2 of our interview with Stuart Gaffney. Stuart Gaffney is a lifelong artist and social justice activist. Stuart and his husband John Lewis were one of the plaintiff couples in the historic California case for marriage equality that won at the California Supreme Court in 2008. Stuart and John have been prominent voices speaking out for marriage equality and LGBTQ+ rights in the local, national, and international media since 2004. Together for 39 years, they legally married in 2008. Stuart is an award-winning filmmaker and appears in the groundbreaking books Part Asian 100% Hapa and Hapa Me 15 Years of the Hapa Project, both about mixed race identity. A graduate of Yale University, Stuart has worked for 25 years at the University of California, San Francisco in his day job as the Center for AIDS Prevention Studies Center Coordinator. In Part 1 that came out 2 weeks ago, available on the Out is Through episode page, I interviewed Stuart about his childhood as a gay, mixed-race kid and the journey that led him and his husband John to be at the forefront of the marriage equality movement. We ended the last episode with the historic Supreme Court ruling in 2015, where same-sex couples were given the right to marry in all 50 states. To set up this episode, I'm beginning with the remarks of President Barack Obama after the groundbreaking Supreme Court ruling on June 26, 2015.
Good morning. Our nation was founded on a bedrock principle that we are all created equal. The project of each generation is to bridge the meaning of those founding words with the realities of changing times. A never-ending quest to ensure those words ring true for every single American. Progress on this journey often comes in small increments. Sometimes 2 steps forward, 1 step back, propelled by the persistent effort of dedicated citizens. And then sometimes there are days like this, when that slow, steady effort is rewarded with justice that arrives like a thunderbolt. This morning, the Supreme Court recognized that the Constitution guarantees marriage equality. In doing so, they've reaffirmed that all Americans are entitled to the equal protection of the law. That all people should be treated equally, regardless of who they are or who they love. This decision will end the patchwork system we currently have. It will end the uncertainty hundreds of thousands of same-sex couples face from not knowing whether their marriage, legitimate in the eyes of one state, will remain if they decide to move or even visit another. This ruling will strengthen all of our communities by offering to all loving same-sex couples the dignity of marriage across this great land. In my second inaugural address, I said that if we are truly created equal, then surely the love we commit to one another must be equal as well. It is gratifying to see that principle enshrined into law by this decision. This ruling is a victory for Jim Obergefell and the other plaintiffs in the case. It's a victory for gay and lesbian couples who have fought so long for their basic civil rights. It's a victory for their children, whose families will now be recognized as equal to any other. It's a victory for the allies and friends and supporters who spent years, even decades, working and praying for change to come. And this ruling is a victory for America. This decision affirms what millions of Americans already believe in their hearts. When all Americans are treated as equal, we are all more free. My administration has been guided by that idea. It's why we stopped defending the so-called Defense of Marriage Act, and why we were pleased when the court finally struck down a central provision of that discriminatory law. It's why we ended Don't Ask, Don't Tell. From extending full marital benefits to federal employees and their spouses, to expanding hospital visitation rights for LGBT patients and their loved ones, we've made real progress in advancing equality for LGBT Americans in ways that were unimaginable not too long ago. I know change for many of our LGBT brothers and sisters must have seemed so slow for so long. But compared to so many other issues, America's shift has been so quick. I know that Americans of goodwill continue to hold a wide range of views on this issue. Opposition in some cases has been based on sincere and deeply held beliefs. All of us who welcome today's news should be mindful of that fact. Recognize different viewpoints. Revere our deep commitment to religious freedom. But today should also give us hope that on the many issues with which we grapple, often painfully, real change is possible. Shifts in hearts and minds is possible. And those who have come so far on their journey to equality have a responsibility to reach back and help others join them. Because for all our differences, we are one people, stronger together than we could ever be alone. That's always been our story. We are big and vast and diverse, a nation of people with different backgrounds and beliefs, different experiences and stories, but bound by our shared ideal that no matter who you are or what you look like, how you started off, or how and who you love, America's a place where you can write your own destiny. We are a people who believe that every single child is entitled to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. There's so much more work to be done to extend the full promise of America to every American. But today we can say, in no uncertain terms, that we've made our union a little more perfect. That's the consequence of a decision from the Supreme Court, but more importantly, it is a consequence of the countless small acts of courage of millions of people across decades who stood up, who came out, who talked to parents, parents who loved their children no matter what, folks who were willing to endure bullying and taunts and stayed strong and came to believe in themselves and who they were. And slowly made an entire country realize that love is love. What an extraordinary achievement. What a vindication of the belief that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. What a reminder of what Bobby Kennedy once said about how small actions can be like pebbles being thrown into a still lake, ripples of hope cascade outwards and change the world. Those countless, often anonymous heroes, they deserve our thanks. They should be very proud. America should be very proud. Thank you.
That was 11 years ago, and here we are. I wonder just what your thoughts are in our new reality and where you think like the work with marriage equality goes, but just I think it's bigger than that. I think all of us are holding our breath. Just this week, we had the removal of a pride flag off of the Stonewall National Monument. That was not the first anti LGBT action by this administration, but it was certainly a provocative gesture. And I wonder kind of how are you making sense of everything, and are you worried? How are you holding our new reality and thinking about LGBTQ rights, marriage equality?
I'm so upset. I'm so angry, and I'm more determined than ever. And I think there was a moment after the US Supreme Court victory, and with some subsequent victories, subsequent Supreme Court case overturned employment discrimination against LGBTQ people. So it felt like there's a chance here that we're just going to continue making progress.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Obamas lit up the White House in rainbow colors. And to think now that we can't even fly a rainbow flag at the Stonewall National Monument, much less have it on the White House. Unbelievable. But I think it was never realistic to think we're only ever going to make more and more unbroken, continued progress. But the lesson that we've taken from the roller coaster of marriage equality and many of the ups and downs that I've told you about is that we can never, ever, ever rest, and we can never, ever, ever give up. Now, never resting is exhausting, so we do need to take care of ourselves, but we have to be vigilant forever.
Yeah.
And that's not fair. It's also just hard. But even in the most discouraging days of the marriage equality movement, I always felt like even if we're losing, when we do an interview, if we're on the news that evening, there's some queer kid who's seeing an image of a gay couple who want to get married and thinking, I could grow up and that could be me.
Mm.
And that's when I thought, we're winning no matter what's happening with our legal rights. The visibility, so important.
Yeah.
And, sometimes our opponents have used the tagline, what about the children?
Mm-hmm.
I always think, what about the children? This is critical that our kids get affirmed. You're okay. Just like young Stuart knew he was okay, went to the library,
Yeah.
saw himself reflected. Like, young kids need to know that you have a future. You can have a happily ever after too. It doesn't have to be marriage, but I mean, you can have a happy, bright, fulfilled life. That message, however it's delivered, is the most important thing. And that's why the targeting of trans youth and the targeting of school curriculum and library books, these are the most painful things, because these are kids. Like, don't take their identities away from them. Don't take their true selves away from them. Don't take knowledge away from them. It's so cruel.
Yeah.
But I really feel the genie is out of the bottle. When I was growing up, there's a very famous Time magazine with Leonard Matlovich on the cover, coming out as a soldier, and this act of incredible bravery. But he appeared on the cover of Time magazine, and it said, huge letters, I am a homosexual. Of course, that was the terminology of the day, but I mean, it was such a statement of openness. It's like, we exist, not going away. Deal with it.
Yeah.
And my family subscribed to Time magazine. That magazine was on the living room table. I saw it. I read it cover to cover. Leonard Matlovich did not immediately get his rights just because he did that, but he sent out a message of hope nonetheless that reached every corner of this country, including young Stuart in Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin. I heard it loud and clear.
That makes me think so much about young people sort of carrying the torch and why it's important to get engaged, because the work doesn't end. And I think, as you said, it is exhausting, but I think I think there can be something really powerful about mentoring young people to do the work, inspiring young people. We're recording this after the Super Bowl. I don't know if you saw Bad Bunny, but that had me in tears, because that was, in a way, everything we're talking about. And obviously, he's, if you're Puerto Rican, you're going to have a certain response to it. But even, as a queer, non-Puerto Rican person, as a brown person in the country, I just got it, and I felt so seen. And I know young people felt really seen, and he kind of voiced, I think, all the frustration that we're all experiencing. And there was plenty of queer representation. I lost it when Ricky Martin came on, because he is a queer icon. That was my, a young queer man remembering living La Vida Loca, and to see him in his power as a queer man being able to sing a song in his language. And like, I kind of felt like, maybe I'm imagining it, but like the torch being passed from Ricky to Bad Bunny. And it's just, I think activism is beautiful. We're doing it because of something that may not feel so beautiful, but just the importance of that line, that through line. The work never ends, and the people doing the work just can't do the work all the time, and we need to engage young people because this is like, this is humanity. This is future. I feel like, gosh, I do have. I'm very lucky. I have lived through a lot of good things, and right now we're kind of in a bad moment. But I just think so much about young people and how it's been really rocky. Just seeing Bad Bunny gave me a little bit of hope that there are, that they're watching, they're engaging, that there are, yeah, that the activism is still there. It's alive and well.
I feel that so strongly. Everything you just said, it was such a beautiful moment. And all of these things were in that show and so much more too, right? But the passing of the torch, the radical inclusion, this message of love over hate, and so many little details, right? I mean, I'm sure you've read articles or listened to stories where they're unpacking all the imagery, all the behind the scenes, and all the thought that went into who was there, what they wore, who was dressed up as sugarcane, this human sugarcane
Yeah,
field. And
yeah,
that's such a moving
yeah.
image in and of itself,
Gosh,
right?
yeah,
So we're talking about this right now as a message to young people and as like kind of a um, sending a life vest, right? There's hope. We're to get in this together. That message of hope and inclusion is so important, right? And I think it was loud and clear, just like you're saying.
yeah,
But the other thing I want to add to that is that I believe we have so much to learn and so much to be inspired by our young people. And I say this as, in the past year plus, having gone to many protest rallies, that a number of them, people of a certain vintage, have looked around and kind of said, everyone here is kind of like our age. This is not a cross section of America coming to these protests. And we can imagine some people maybe don't feel safe or
mm,
maybe are not getting the word for some reason. But the most recent nationwide protests that happened after the ICE murder in Minnesota, two murders, but specifically after Alex Preddy was murdered, that was a student-led,
mm,
nationwide, student-led, student-organized, and they got the word out. In fact, I know a number of people my age were like, how did you hear about this? I never heard this was even happening. I don't know if it was spread on TikTok or where it was spread, but the young people knew and they showed up. And when I went so in San Francisco, that rally was at Dolores
yeah,
Park. And as I walked over there were classes coming together. Some of them as just groups of friends, some of them literally as being, coming the entire classroom
mm,
coming together. Clearly, many of them had made signs together, thought about their messages, thought about why they were there. It was a teachable moment, like literally. And I was so moved. There's so many more young people at that protest
mm,
rally than any other age group. And there were so many of them too. It's like here are the young people. And this one, I mean, there are many times where I almost lost it reading people's signs
mm.
but this one young woman had a sign that said, "We had to walk out of class today in order to teach a lesson."
Oh,
And I thought, this is so
mm,
perfect. You're not just our future teachers. You're teaching us right now
yeah,
how to get engaged, re-engage, and say, "Not on my watch."
yeah.
This is, and taking up the mantle of social justice and social change, and doing it their way.
Thank you for that reminder. I think, when the older you get, you start to get cynical, and we need young people to help us keep focused. And that just, that's so beautiful. Let's take a break and we'll return to our conversation with Stuart Gaffney. I have two questions that I'm going to fold into one, and then I have one last question. How has your activism work given you a sense of belonging and purpose? And what advice might you have for maybe young activists in pursuit of social change?
Well, I think activism is everything. I think knowing what you care about, what you value, and how to work for it, that's everything. That gives me purpose in life, gives me a shared sense of values and meaning with my husband and with the community of loved ones all around us. And it also makes me feel like I'm carrying on my parents' legacy. I feel like I'm immersed in the stream of history whenever I'm engaged in activism and the meaning of everything that's come before us and the lessons that we're going to teach and leave to the young people who come after us to carry on. What a privilege just to be part of that flow of history and social movements for greater equality. I can't imagine life not caring about making this world a better place. I think of times when, I don't know, maybe roughly sixth grade, seventh grade, like I was writing letters to the editor in the Milwaukee Journal about climate change and environmental issues. I mean, believe me, I'm not a one issue person, right? There's so many things I care about.
Yeah.
I remember in sixth grade asking my mother to take me to the George McGovern for President office because I wanted buttons to wear to elementary school. Because I was against the Vietnam War. I was against re-electing Richard Nixon. So this is in the DNA.
Yeah.
I will say in the marriage equality movement specifically, John and I feel incredibly amazed and honored that there's something actually just about who we are, our life stories, that actually was able to help move the movement forward. And some of the things we've touched upon here, my parents as a interracial couple, that history was important because that's an important legal precedent for our case. But also just the loving relationship that, we've been together 39 years now. And the idea that that story actually would be important to moving forward a cause for greater freedom. It's unbelievable. The idea that something about just who you are as a person could actually be useful in a social movement.
Yeah.
I feel so fortunate to be able to say that.
So powerful.
Now, not everyone can be in that position, and you can't always anticipate that. When John and I met in 1987, we didn't say, let's form a great relationship so that can later be part of a declaration we file in a case for marriage equality, right? It doesn't work that way.
No.
But somehow, the way it does work is if you live your life with integrity, find values you believe in, and in this case, find someone else who shares the same values, make a beautiful life together. Well, guess what? Maybe that will become part of a movement, whether it's through the work you do, community you create, or perhaps part of a lawsuit that you file.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great sound advice. Following your values and following your truth. And you will find whether that leads you to, I mean, you and John really were the m- maybe unknowingly or maybe unwillingly the spokespeople for gay marriage, but that was true, and that was your values, that was your livelihood, and that was your love on the line. And when we lead with that, it's just we lead with that in the world.
Well, in a movement that's about love,
Yeah.
it's very easy to say lead with love. But I think it's true in whether you're loving the environment, whether you're trying to stop war, you name it, lead with love and lead with your integrity and lead with your values, and it's going to take you amazing places. And you don't always know when that moment's going to strike. Like I didn't know at 11:59 when I should have been heading to a meeting at work that the phone was going to ring and it was going to change the course of our entire lives.
Mm,
But we were ready
I love
in a
that.
sense.
Yeah. Stuart, is there anything else that you feel inclined to say, or do you feel like we've covered most of it?
I mean, I love talking with you, Larry, so I could talk for hours longer. I I think I have a tendency to want to tie things up in a bow, and that's not always possible, but I will just say something that might pull a couple different threads here together. When I met John and introduced him to my mother, I immediately knew here's somebody who's great with parents, which is a nice thing in a significant other, right? And they hit it off and they had this lovely dynamic, the two of them. There were actually a few times when I was like, "Hey, I'm your son over here." But I mean, my mother loved John so much, and he was so caring and fun and wonderful with her. So I knew that from almost day one. But what I didn't see, because it was not part of our reality in 1987, is that he was going to be a beautiful, dedicated, loving caregiver as my mom was aging
Mm,
and declining. You don't go into a marriage thinking that's what you're marrying, right?
mhm,
Because it's not what's on your mind. But John, it's just among the many, many things I'm grateful for. Like he was so beautiful in caring for my mom and and helping her know until her very last breath that she was surrounded by love.
mm,
And the wedding vows contain words that we don't always understand when we say them, for better, for worse, sickness and in health,
mm,
till death do us part. But we've lived out those vows in ways that one maybe could expect, but maybe some ways one couldn't, right? But when the chips are down, I wouldn't want to be married to anyone else.
mm. Yeah. Thank you for giving us that insight on your marriage. And you know, the world can be a really sometimes scary place, but the ability to surround yourself around community partners that are there to love you and watch us through our phases of life, and it sort of just intensifies this discussion we're having on life and marriage and advocacy and why it's all important, because that's in the end I feel like the love is what we have, and we all have the right to love. We stand on your shoulders. I am aware, my marriage I owe to all the queer folks that fought, including you and John. So I appreciate you and just being in on this conversation and just sharing your wisdom. You have done your parents proud, right? That they obviously had such a strong influence on you, and in a way, it seems like you're really living through your parents and their activism and their teaching. So, yeah.
That's really beautiful, Larry, and I really thank you for saying that. I'm very moved. We have a couple hashtags came out of the marriage equality movement. Yeah, love is love, love wins, and sometimes those could possibly sound like platitudes, but we really lived it, continue to live it, and as I said, I don't believe there's a continuous, unbroken line of ever increasing progress. Clearly, there's not. But I do believe that love wins. That's what we've seen in our lives. And that's what we're working as hard as possible to continue to see for the rest of our lives and for the generations to come.
On that note, one more question. I feel like for me, music is my love language. And so there's a lot of love in me asking this question. I also feel like music is the soundtrack of our lives. And when we're like fighting for social justice, when we are living alone in a small town in the library, music becomes our friend, our companion, our guide, our spiritual teacher. And so that's my motivation in asking the question of, if you were stranded on an island, probably with John, and you had 3 albums to bring with you, which 3 albums would those be?
Well, of course, if I'm stranded with John, then it's going to have to be a negotiation.
Of course.
So this is my segue into being able to say, well, I'm going to name 3, but I could add a few more. So for John's sake, I'm going to say I think there probably would need to be some Cher and some Bette Midler in there.
Makes total sense.
But those but John and I, we're alike in so many ways, but I think we have different divas. So I'm gonna name some other albums. I am gonna I think of myself as very young at heart, but I feel like this is probably a good time to say I'm a little older than you are, young man. So definitely the albums that I'm going to mention first, I owned as vinyl albums. And in thinking about this question, I thought, well, first of all, you may have heard that for many people, the music they loved when they were about 14 is often the music they love for the rest of their lives.
Yep.
And in my case, since it was vinyl, I immediately thought, well, what were the records I literally was wearing out? Like that needle was actually digging that groove deeper and deeper until I had to buy that album again. So here are some ones I remember because they were wearing out and getting scratchier and scratchier. Fleetwood Mac, Rumors.
Oh, yeah.
So I was obsessed with Fleetwood Mac as a kid. First of all, just have to put that out there.
Understandably. Yeah.
And I love that album so much, clearly. And I wasn't just wearing out the physical record, but I mean, even like the album cover, like would get this like hole from the, when you put the disc in, it would kind of bulge out the other side. And it's like also in reflecting on why, other than the fact that the music's amazing, I was really drawn to the fact that this group had more than one gender, had some amazing divas too.
Yeah.
And some very attractive men. Doesn't hurt.
Lindsay, I tell you, Lindsay back in the day.
Oh man.
Thump.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. But also, I read a review of Rumors once that said, you may not think of this as a punk album, but this actually is a punk album. And here's why. It's so filled with raw emotion. So the same feelings that are driving the pure, just of punk, they're actually in Rumors. but they're talking about their love for each other, their hate for each other, what it's like to break up with each other. And I will also say, with me, it's all about love too. So there was the soap opera of it too.
Yeah.
I was really drawn to that. Well, I could go on and on about why I love Fleetwood Mac, but
I'm
it's
there
just,
with you.
it's so good. It's so good. So good. Anyway, I did need to buy that. And also, at least one other Fleetwood Mac album more than once because I wore them out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Good choice.
another one, and so it won't surprise you, right, given my age and also what I've told you, right? I mean, I draw a lot from the social justice movements of the 60s and the music, the protest music, and just the vibe of the youth movement of that time. We demand and are going to create a better world. So at age 14, I was wearing out probably both Sgt. Pepper and Abbey Road by the Beatles. They would be neck and neck, so I know it's not fair if I'm naming three to kind of name two, but those were my two favorite Beatles albums. And I could name so much other music of that era. And I don't like this term classic rock because I feel like that's kind of puts it in a box. But I mean the beauty of young people speaking their minds, making their own music, and envisioning a better world. That was intoxicating to me from the music of that era. And the Beatles were kind of, for young Stuart, at the vanguard of that, but there's so many others.
Epic. They're epic albums.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for the third, and those two came out to me right away, right? Those are the ones that I would just sit up late at night next to clutching the record player. Like, I can't go to bed yet. I have to listen to this one more time. It was a little harder for me to think of the third one, but I really wanted to name something grunge because for me, and it's just like I said, if you think about it in this way, like Rumors was a punk album, but the anger and emotion and feeling that I got from grunge also tapped into this anger that I've referenced, but it's the anger to want to fight for a better world. It's not, but this kind of like, I've got to get it out kind of anger. So I've chosen Nirvana, Nevermind, because that was just a revelation. That was a revelation. So we're not going to talk about it now, but John and I have had other life adventures, one of which was to backpack around the world for 365 days. And that was also a relationship adventure too, because we were only in each other's company 24/7 for it was literally 365 days. But when we got back from that trip, that was 1991, early 92. Then we got back and I turned on a radio. I was like, what happened? Like, music had completely changed. Like, what is this sound I'm hearing?
80s melodies are no longer.
Right. And so I think of it not just the anger that drives movements for social justice, but also, as we've also been talking about, like, we not only need to mentor the young people, but we need to listen to young people. And that's what I felt when I heard, not just Nirvana, of course, but Soundgarden. I could go on and on.
Yeah.
We need to be listening to these people. And I think I've never been the same.
I love that. I love the thought that you put into those. I have all of those albums, and they are full of emotion, sometimes angst. Well, in Nirvana's case, a lot of angst. But I also think of those albums as just very much part of the human experience, right? Like Rumors, my God, you're dealing with every emotion under the sun. All the Beatles albums, and then Nirvana, I love that because there's for me at least when I listen to Nevermind, there's a joy in the angst, which we don't think of those two things as sort of intertwined, but they can be. They can be, right? The release of whatever it is that's stuck in here, and being able to just release it, or for the listener to kind of be able to experience it as Kurt Cobain is voicing the angst, that you get it out. And again, it goes back to the books in the library. I'm not alone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not alone. Someone else is going through this. We are not alone. And I think that's, especially when we think of what we're going through right now, so important.
Absolutely. That's beautiful the way you said that. And I feel that so much. Like the music is like your friend, and it tells you you're not alone. Not just because maybe you love the music or you love the artist, but also the feelings that are being expressed. Like, oh, I'm not the only person feeling this, but you've put it to words and said it to music. But I'm feeling it too. I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
I'm going to cheat for a second. I'm not going to name another
Sure.
album because that would be blatant cheating. I'm going to name a song.
Please.
Because in our continuing adventures, we've been doing international LGBTQ activism and education. John was in Japan for a year in 2023. And during that time, I really attached myself to this song by The Verve called Lucky Man.
Hmm.
And to be honest, I don't think I heard it when The Verve was popular.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they're better known for things like Bittersweet Symphony.
Mm.
And, you know, we mentioned the sort of the angst and drama that comes from some music, which can be really important and cathartic. But this was actually a happy song, and it was just acknowledging, I'm so lucky.
Mm.
And I thought of that not just in thinking about the life that John and I have shared, but as I'm kind of missing John because he's in Japan, although I'm looking forward to visiting him there.
Mm.
I'm like, I'm so lucky. I get to call this man my husband. We've been part of amazing personal and historic adventures, and it's not over. So lucky. So lucky. I was going to use another word, but I don't want to get bleeped. But so lucky, and I'm so grateful.
Mm. Yeah. Well, on that note, we are lucky to and grateful to experience your wisdom. Thank you for sharing your story with us. And thank you for all the advocacy work that you and John have done. Please send my love to John. And yeah, I feel like we're all in this together. I appreciate you for just the work you've done, and just the inspiration that you've given for the benefit of myself, my community, my people. So thank you so much, Stuart.
It's a privilege, it's an honor, and dare I say, love wins. But also, this is part of building the bridges, and this is part of building community, and this is a gift that's going to keep on giving. And I say to you, but also to anyone who's listening, we'll see you in the streets. Or if that's not how you make change, I'll see you wherever and however you make change. We're all in this together, and we're all doing it in whatever way we can.
To find out more about Stuart and marriage equality, you can check out their website, marriageequality.me. Wow, what an amazing conversation. I have so many thoughts. First off, I just feel inspired by his story of perseverance and determination. I think about young Stuart growing up in a world that didn't reflect him, having to navigate the liminal spaces of race and sexuality to ultimately find clarity about his life purpose in advocacy and human rights. I also, in this episode, feel so honored to capture a piece of LGBTQ history, a history for us to remember and preserve, to make sure it's not erased. Thank you again for listening to Out is Through. Until next time. The views expressed by the speakers are their own, and their appearance on the podcast does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Out is Through is a podcast for entertainment and educational purposes only. It's not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are in need of support, please seek out a licensed mental health professional in your area.